Hey everybody!
Hey!
Welcome back to Talkin Muzak.
Episode 2.
Yep. We're your hosts. Oh my god, I love the balloons!
Why are there balloons?
I don't know, where did they come from? That's amazing.
Blooper reel and it's staying in.
That is so good. Where did the balloons come from? Alright.
I don't know, maybe the Apple warlords are just
Yeah.
so happy for us that they just threw in a few balloons.
Thank you to the mighty jobs overlords. Yeah, Apple overlords, whatever. For the nice little intro.
Only listeners, we just witnessed balloons that we were not prepared for.
Yeah.
On my end on the camera, but
Beautiful.
Anyways, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. As we were saying off camera, I was really pleased with the last episode. I thought our first episode went well, and I'm really excited for this one, so should be good.
Yes, likewise. I do want to just quickly put out there to any listeners that we do apologize for getting the audio up a little later than the video, but we will make sure that they go up together when this episode comes out.
Along with working out the actual content on these podcasts, we're also working out the technical stuff a little bit. For those who are watching on video, my camera died mid podcast, and I had to switch to my webcam. But I think I fixed that issue, so there shouldn't be an issue this time. But anyway, enough of that jargon.
And also on my end with the audio, although I'm being told by producer Rob it sounds better this time. Hopefully, episode 3 we actually get the microphone back up and going. So
Yeah.
apologies if my voice was extra annoying last episode, but Rob said, we're a work in progress.
Yeah, we're a work in progress. Also, I want to actually say to everybody, Happy Halloween, Happy Autumn to everybody. This is going to be a sort of themed episode, so I figured I would say that we'll get into a little bit when we get to our discussion for the podcast. But yeah, I mean, if you want to get right into it, Andy, I mean, we can go basically talk about where we left off on the last episode. I don't know if you want to elaborate there for those who don't know.
I say we go for it. So to recap, if for whatever reason you did not watch the last episode, first of all, you should watch this one first, because you'll get a sneak peek. At the end of episode 1, we did what was called an album swap, where I assigned Rob a record checkout and vice versa. And so what happened was, in between, we take about a month in between recordings for this podcast, so we had at least a minimum of had to listen to the records that we were assigned to 5 times.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share the record in a moment that Rob recommended to me, and then he will after. I kind of just assigned us an order. I didn't mean to do that, but we're going to go with it now.
Nice. Sounds good. Before we get started, I forgot something else I want to do in our intro. I'm drinking a pumpkin spice latte beer I'm going to crack this open for the episode for our little autumn theme. So, and
Chill, on fleek.
To be honest with you, on fleek, is that what you just said?
On theme.
Oh, on theme. I thought you said on fleek. I was going to be, oh god. Honestly, the real reason, my friend, is for the espresso, because I'm a dad and it's late and I'm tired.
That was a horrible pour, by the way. You gotta slant the cup, okay?
I did slant the cup. What are you talking about?
Whatever.
Anyway, and
I'm drinking water, but
I got that too. I'll do a double chug.
there you go. Look at you.
So we want to talk about specifically the last albums. Do you want to say what album you recommended to me, or?
Oh, yes. So you had recommended me the record Octopus by Gentle Giant, and he's about to pull it out. There you go. And I recommended Kate Bush's Hounds of Love.
2 very different albums. So
very different indeed, which I'm sure we will both get into, but since I preemptively decided I was going first, shall I go first?
Please do, yeah.
All right. So as mentioned, Rob recommended me Octopus by Gentle Giant. I listened to it 5 times. You had strongly emphasized listening to the Steven Wilson remix.
Yeah.
I did choose on my 5th listen to the 2011 remaster.
I'm glad you did.
Streaming as well. I'll talk about the differences momentarily. I want to start out. So I had mentioned in the last episode, Gentle Giant has been a band. You have recommended me to have been on my radar specifically. For starters, there was a song on here I did not realize I was familiar with. That I actually enjoyed prior to listening to this record going in, and that's the track Knots.
Okay.
And I want to say you recommended to me checking out, or you played it for me prior. I don't remember, but I knew one song going in, so that was cool. And kind of jumping back to the original master, or in this case the remaster versus the remix, I do see why you recommended the remix overall. It reminded me when I listened to when the band put out their self-titled sophomore record out a couple years ago. They did a remix for that. And like that record, what I really appreciated when they did that and this Gentle Giant record is these are incredible musicians. These are incredible players. So what I liked sonically was being able to hear not only the individual instrumentals quite well, but it felt a little more fleshed out in comparison to when you listen to that 2011 remaster, that the mix kind of just felt a little more buried there. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad I started with the remix the first 4 times I listened, because I think maybe I would have a slightly different opinion of this record had I done it the other way around.
I'm glad you did go back and listen to the original mix. Sorry to interrupt. I know I pushed heavily on the Steven Wilson version, but I should have, in retrospect, at least said, well, at least listen to that once or twice, just so you kind of can see the difference. But so I'm glad you ended up just doing that on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say my 2 biggest criticisms that I'm going to kind of jump back and forth with throughout this record are, one, you had said at the end of the last episode that one of the things that appeals you about this record are that these are songs that are relatively in the 4 to 7 minute range, give or take.
Yeah.
The record at whole is it clocks just under 35 minutes.
Yeah.
You had said these songs, when you listen to them, feel like you're listening to 7 or 8, however many tracks there are, 7 or 8 20-minute prog songs, all condensed in that 4 to 7 minute mark. While I agree with that assessment, that is, in some ways, an issue I have with the record.
Okay.
So like I said, I'll get more into that in a minute. And the other thing is just the vocals themselves. Not a biggest fan of the vocals, with exceptions that I'll point out. I looked up the lead singer's name and I already forget it, but he kind of reminds me of a more mono-sounding Peter Gabriel. And
You're probably thinking
more
of
mono because
I'm assuming you're talking about Derek Schulman. He's the main lyricist, sorry, the main singer. Well, actually, there's a couple of them that Carrie Manier sings a bunch too, but he's kind of the main, I guess, voice of Gentle Giant. But yeah.
Okay. So, and the reason why I say more mono is because I think you can make a case that Peter Gabriel has a mono-sounding voice as well. But I find with his, he does have this unique emotional punch to his more subtle vocal approach that is sort of unique to him. But kind of just like quickly breaking it down track by track, despite what I just said about some of these songs being a little overwhelming, a lot of jumping around, every track on this record, I gotta make clear, even tracks that I wasn't as crazy about, which, by the way, I don't think there's a bad track on this record, but even the songs that I just wasn't as crazy about, every track at least had 1 or 2 moments throughout where I was like, wow, this is killer.
Yeah.
Or, wow, I really wish they just fleshed out that idea a little more, and instead we just abruptly go into a different vibe altogether. But the first track opens with this really cool, funky, almost reminds me Steely Dan instrumental. Again, vocals I'm not too crazy about, but I love the harmonies.
Mm-hmm.
Harmonically speaking, I was getting a lot of Beach Boys vibes, Smile era specifically. I do love the middle section vocally as well, too. Kind of has like a hazy psych vibe. Jumping to track 2, Raconteur, Troubadour. There was these really awesome, in the middle section, piano flourishes that... It's a different song when you listen to the remix versus the original. The original, again, was very buried, but it took center full on the remix version, and that was just a moment on the whole record that I really enjoyed. Again, I didn't look up names, but whoever's playing keys on
Kerry Minnear. Kerry Minnear is a wizard. He also was a big time...
Phenomenal.
I should mention about Kerry Minnear, he was like big... Really, really instrumental to the band in terms of had the most professional background. Like, he's classically trained, and he came. I think he went to something like a really big time school of music and really brought that sort of professional edge to them. You know, where some of the other guys were just like rock musicians. You know.
Okay, well, I mean, and that makes sense, because you hear it in his playing, especially on this track.
And he also actually, I think, has the best voice. He has that softer sounding voice. You know, like Think of Me with Kindness, he sings that. So, anyway, I could go on about Kerry Minnear.
No, I mean, and like I said, you can hear that for sure, that he's classically trained, so that's awesome. Like I've been kind of mentioning throughout this little mini review here, this track is also, especially at the end, where I start to take issue with the constant change instrumentally. While I think it's unique and it's technically impressive, there are times where it doesn't always sound organic when they do make subtle shifts. And this is something on paper that you would think is something that would be really appealing to me, and generally speaking, it is. But I don't know. There was just instances where, again, I was alluding to this earlier, where there would be a part where it was really starting to pick up, and then just like boom, like we just go into this completely bombastic guitar solo or something like that. And I'm like, oh, but like you were just like really fleshing out that, you know, that sound there, and I don't know. So
you gotta see him do it live.
Kind of I'm sorry?
I said you should see them do it live.
Oh, I'm sure. If anything, I'm sure in the live setting it's more organic feeling.
Yeah. But go ahead. It's very interesting.
And it's just throughout side 1, track 3 was an okay track. It had some jazz fusion flourishes. It kind of gave me, like we were talking the last episode, In a Silent Way. I definitely heard a lot of Electric Miles there. Very reminiscent of that sound. I talked about it before, but track 4, Knots. This is a killer track, and this is one where the vocals really are the standpoint. Especially, again, that middle section. This band, like, the middle of their songs, to me, is, at least on this record, kind of where they peak. I made the Beach Boys comparison, and I'm doing it again. This gave me some creaky LSD, like, Smiles Beach Boy vibes. It was just so cool. And then it kind of ends with this, like, Queen 2 prog sound that was also really neat. But my favorite song off the record is actually the instrumental, the opener on side 2, The Boys in the Band.
Yeah, it's great.
This is like Hot Rats Zappa meets early Steely Dan. This was just with a little bit of Crimson in there as well, too. This is the song that I would go back and listen to single-handedly over and over again.
It's one of my favorite tracks,
so
too.
Oh, is it really nice?
Yeah.
And then, just kind of jumping around again, the other track I really like, it's probably my second favorite song, would be the closing track, River. I just thought that this was a really beautiful track overall. There's this really cool guitar solo in the middle that does come out of nowhere that I really kind of dug. But again, I'm gonna end this song and just my thoughts on this record. It's just, for me, it's just coming down to the vocals as well. I know I have borderline contrarian, unintentional contrarian views when it comes to vocals. Or in the camp of take. So you could be a good singer and lack melody in your songwriting, and that goes vice versa. And when I think about some of my favorite bands and some of my favorite singers, a lot of them may not be technically great, some of which, quite frankly, suck. But they have a unique style, but with a sense of melody. I would almost take that over technically proficient vocals, but lack of melodies, or really with this record, in this case, more so boring melodies, in my opinion. So, with that being said, I do feel that this is a record that needs more than 5 listens.
Oh, yeah.
5 listens enough. I'm intrigued. I'm hooked. I'm eager to kind of continue the catalog, check out some of the other records, and then eventually go back to this one. But as of now, where we stand, for a rating, I'm giving this record a 7 out of 10, or
nice.
The RYM scale, 3.5 out of 5. I think it's a solid record overall, and even a lot of my criticisms sometimes do play to their strengths as well too. So we'll see. Maybe give it another year, that can change. But
that was
that's how I felt.
I'm a little unsurprised by most of what you said, because I will say for me it was one of those records where I had it was the only other record I experienced it to this level was Trout Mask by Beefheart, where when I first heard it, I hated it. I really hated it, and I heard the original version, like the original mix of it. And then it was the Steven Wilson remix, as you said, and I've said before, was what changed my mind, because there was so much buried in the original mix that you don't hear. And then there's just, especially with headphones on, there's all these little pieces that you hear, and it's one of those records where, like, you put it on, and I'm sure you heard it just the 5 times you listened to it, you hear more and more and more, you know? I also agree with, in terms of some of what you said with the vocals. Wasn't a big fan of the vocals at first, and then particularly Derek Shulman's vocals. I love Carrie Meniere. My favorite track's probably Never Was, but now is probably my favorite track is Think of Me with Kindness. I love that tune. I always liked Carrie Meniere's vocals, but yeah, the vocals were always that was sort of a I guess to quote a title of one of their albums, it was me acquiring the taste for it, because yeah, it's not a record that like you said, not even 5 listens will do. It's more like a dozen or more. And I think with Gentle Giant as a whole, it's a weird place to start, because it, along with maybe the record after it, In a Glass House, are probably the 2 most challenging albums by them, because then they kind of, I think they refined themselves later on, and it was they were still technically proficient and all that, but the melodies got better, the songs got more, what do I want to say, the songs got more, they got better at writing tunes, not just playing well, you know. And then the early stuff is almost, it's progressive, but it's more sort of classic prog sounding, so it's a bit more, if you're used to progressive music, even that, I would argue, is a bit more digestible than these 2 albums in the middle, which got really experimental. So not surprised to hear that. Glad that there's room to grow.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I guess I'll talk about your recommendation, which was Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. I apologize, I will not give you a track-by-track analysis. I didn't really write notes. I'm just going to go off the cuff, but were you wanting to say something there?
Well, you cut again, but I was just gonna say that I'm glad again you recommended the remix first, because had I listened to that original master first, I probably would have gone into this record with more negative feelings.
Yeah. It's amazing how just a remaster or remix can just completely transform an album.
Yeah, absolutely.
But going to Hounds of Love, I mean, I don't have a track by track analysis ready or anything like that. I'm just gonna go off the cuff, and I'll say overall I really liked it. It was I will say one thing that I know you had mentioned, which this may surprise you, but it's also, again, I think, like Octopus, maybe not as intensely. I think this record needs more than 5 listens for like a proper analysis. But as of now, I like the poppier side more than the more experimental side. Yeah. Not that I don't like the experimental side. There's some great stuff in there. But I mean, I've become a sucker for 80s pop, I guess, and you know, I mean, just the first track alone, for the record, I had heard that song before. I've never seen Stranger Things. I know it's big because of that show, but I've never seen that show. So this was the first time that I'd really listened to that song, as well as there was another track on there that I'm sure I've heard before on the radio. I think it was
possibly Cloud Busting.
It was Cloud Busting, yes.
Yeah.
Love that tune. That might be my favorite track on the whole record. And Rachel, my wife, she listened to this record with me a couple times too. Big thanks for her as well for this record, because she loved it. That is probably her favorite song as well. That whole that is a perfect pop song, and it's so wonderfully done, with the strings in it. Love it. Yeah, Hounds of Love, The Big Sky, great little pop tune. Kind of gave me like Cyndi Lauper almost, sort of. Remind me of that kind of pop, but better than Cyndi Lauper.
Like an arty Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah. And, speaking of comparing it to the other artists, I really got a Scary Monsters David Bowie vibe from this record. It reminds me of that period of his career. Well, at least that album, but better actually. Because, I mean, I like certain select tracks off Scary Monsters, some of his best stuff, but as we did in our discography series, and I kind of pointed out, it's not overall an amazing record. It's a bit hit or miss, but this reminds me of sort of the best of that period of his career. But also, you know, I mean, with Kate Bush, she brings her own flavor to it. I love her vocals. I think she's a fantastic singer. What else do I want to say? What is the second side of the record called? It's like one piece, but they're all different songs, right?
The Ninth Wave.
The Ninth Wave. Thank you. I couldn't think of it. So the Ninth Wave. I mean, I think I'll say like the strengths and weaknesses with that. The big strength is, I think, each track is its own. It's almost like she decided, well, I'm going to do like a Celtic tune, you know? I'm going to do like, you know, what is the I'm blanking out on the track name, sorry. Waking the Witch. That one is a really... That one I remember when I first heard this record and I heard that song came on, I'm like, what is this? Like that was the moment where I was like, okay, this album's going somewhere way different than I thought it would. Yeah, Jig of Life, the Celtic tune's cool. Kind of reminds me a bit of later era Jethro Tull in the 70s, so I like that.
Interesting. Okay.
Hello Earth, I like that a lot. That might be that, and maybe Cloud Busting might be my 2 favorite tracks. What did you
think of Watching You Without Me from the Ninth Wave?
I enjoyed that as well. I'd say Waking the Witch I wasn't a huge fan of. Like I liked it. I appreciated it, I suppose, for being weird, but it's a track that dips a little for me there, but that's about it. That's really the only major dip in it. And yeah, I don't know. I can't really say anything too badly about the album. I overall enjoyed it. I like the idea of having one side of a record where it's all a pop, like, so it's all sort of like poppy type of single type songs, and then this sort of conceptual piece that is several songs that are, like you had mentioned, basically sort of like a sidelong prog track. Although I wouldn't call it prog. I'd call it Kate Bush, I guess. She's hard to categorize. She fits in, like, I think probably Peter Gabriel, like that, his earlier period, I would say, his earlier solo period, I'd say, is maybe the closest thing. And, you know, Bowie's early 80s period is maybe the closest thing that you could get to what this record is, but she's got her own style, and I'm intrigued. I did listen to The Dreaming as well, by the way.
Did you? What did you think of The Dreaming?
I only listened to it once, so I won't give a full like a full review of it or anything like that. But I like it. I'm very intrigued. I like this better a little bit right now, but I did listen to this 5 times and only listened to that once. So, but I liked what I heard from The Dreaming. So, I will definitely be exploring more of Kate Bush's material.
The Dreaming is incredible, and like we were saying about both Hounds of Love and Octopus, like if you think those records need more than 5 listens, The Dreaming might need 3 dozen listens.
Wow.
Because the best way I could describe The Dreaming is side 2 of Hounds of Love. It's the 9th wave, but in pop song form.
Yeah.
Whereas at least Hounds of Love kind of like breaks that apart a little bit and makes it more manageable, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I really like.
An incredible record.
I really like. I think what's cool about her is that she is able to make experimental, sort of interesting music, but she could write a great pop hit. Which I think is a great strength rather than a weakness. To any of you people who are more into, what do you want to say, musical purity or something? I don't know, musical purity.
Sure.
Not writing hits. But I mean, there's a reason. Songs like the first track, Deal with God, Running Up the Hill. There we go. Running Up That Hill. There's a reason that it's such a big hit, because it's a great song. I mean, I've had it stuck in my head all day, and I've had it stuck in my head since I've been listening to this record. So I'll say overall I really enjoyed it. Is it perfect? No. I give it like a 4 out of 5 stars, maybe like an 8.5 out of 10, something like that, with a little room to grow. So not quite a 10 out of 10, but I really, really enjoyed it overall. So thanks for the recommendation.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I think it's one that I could see it continuing to grow for you over time as you continue to explore the catalog, which it sounds like you have already.
Yeah.
I will say, before we move on, that she did a record exactly 20 years later, released in 2005, called Ariel. That's also a pretty good record. It's not as good as Hounds of Love, but the format is the same, where side 1 is select, again, just like shorter, but like artier pop songs, and then side 2 being more of a suite. And I will say that side 2, although I like the 9th wave better, the suite on Ariel on side 2 feels more of a complete piece.
Nice.
And it's worth checking out if you liked the format of Hounds of Love.
Cool. I will have to definitely check it out. On that note, unless you have any other final thoughts here, maybe we should get right into this next section, which is called Heavy Rotation. This is basically going to be, what you've been listening to lately. Is there any new music you want to talk about? And then I think, are going to, without having to really announce it, I think we're going to transition right into our discussion topic from this point on, which is going to be autumn albums, music that you listen to in the fall, and I guess we'll talk about like what kind of music we listen to and sort of the feelings that it evokes in us, and stuff like that. I don't know. So
no, I think you've said
we'll
it pretty
lead right
well
into it.
me.
So what you've been listening to, and I'll let you start.
Want me to start? Okay. Yeah. So what I've been listening to, for starters, after the last episode, you did kind of get me into a little bit of a Floyd mood.
Nice.
And so I just recently, although I do have an older copy, just recently invested in the 50th anniversary.
Beautiful.
Edition of Dark Side. I was listening to my old beat-up copy. I'm like, yeah, you know what? It's 50 years. This is fine.
Yeah.
But I really want to go deep into Dark Side right now.
Nice.
So sure, let's invest in the 50th anniversary, and this sounds killer. Man, this is so good. I will say the Pink Floyd remasters the last decade have been great. And then, of course, the big ones. They got a push them out every however many years.
Of course.
They remastered this in 2016, and then we got another one for the 50th anniversary. So I've really been enjoying Dark Side. I've been listening to Wish You Were Here and Animals as well quite a bit.
Can I ask you something? Because that's something I wanted to talk about related to Floyd. Have you heard Roger Waters' Redux? It's called Redux of Dark Side of the Moon? His re-recording of it? Because it's something I had told you when we spoke on the phone, that there was an album that I wanted to listen to in preparation for this video, because it is a new release. And yeah, your face says everything. For those listening,
So,
his hands have been over his face for about the last minute and a half.
I have yet to listen to the whole thing.
Okay.
But when Money was released as a single, I did listen to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's awful. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful.
So
Just say it.
I went ahead, since you discussed Dark Side, and yeah, it seems to be a theme. We're going to discuss Dark Side every episode, I guess. But this is very apropos. So Dark Side is my favorite album of all time, and so with Roger Waters announcing he's going to re-record it, he released the singles. I listened to like a snip of one of them. I think it was Money. And I was like, all right, I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to, in context, listen to the whole thing. So the other day I listened to it. I'm sure it's something, to be fair, I need to listen to, several times. But I don't think I want to. And I'll say, I think there's some musically interesting things going on from what I listened to of the album. I like the approach that they took to some of the songs instrumentally. It's Waters' endless monologuing over every track. And some things, for example, like The Great Gig in the Sky, he basically just does this whole monologue about this friend he has that died of cancer, and he's going on about it. And it's like, I feel like with what he's trying to achieve, he's taking all of the subtlety out of the record. He's taking a lot of the soul of out of the record, and that isn't to diminish his contributions to Dark Side of the Moon, because the lyrics are timeless and he wrote them, but just the way he has decided to approach the re-recording, I just have not cared for so far, and his vocals just are not good anymore.
It's like he's trying to do this bad take on Tom Waits meets Leonard Cohen.
That's what I kind of took from it too, yeah.
Yeah, and that works for those two individuals quite well, and it just doesn't for him. I'm going to be honest with you. Will I check it out at some point? More likely, yes. But I have no interest anytime soon.
Yeah.
This is just classic Roger Waters and his fucking ego times 1 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, and to top it off with releasing it on the 50-year anniversary, which you're capitalizing enough on as it is, for better and for worse.
Yeah.
But this is a timeless record.
Yeah.
It was a product of its time, but it transcends time, and I think that's reflective on our culture today. This fucking Prism has become its own thing.
Yeah, of course.
You'll see people wearing a Dark Side of the Moon shirt, and they wear it for the aesthetic. I guarantee you they couldn't name a single track. But I think that that's very telling in of itself. This is something unlike anything else. Leave it alone. Just leave it the fuck alone. And to your point with
I totally agree.
not undermining Waters' contribution to the record, because they can't be, obviously. At that point, he was the sole songwriter.
Of course.
But by putting that piece of garbage out, you are undermining the vital contributions with the other three members as well, too.
Well, and
I just...
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, because I'm just going to get more angry.
No, you've basically echoed, no pun intended, pretty much what my thoughts. And I think overall it just kind of proves to me once again, as I've said many times, that how much Waters needed the other three guys to balance him out. You know, I mean, he was an element of, he was one of the essential four pieces of that band, and without the other three, especially Gilmour and Wright, it's not. I mean, there's nobody checking Roger Waters' ego at the door. You know, he just kind of is able to do what he wants, and that's fine. He's an artist; he should do what he wants creatively. But there's just something about doing something like re-recording an album like Dark Side of the Moon, where it's like, how much of this is like, okay, are you saying something musically, like, really, or is this just about like you're feuding with Gilmour right now and you want to just record your own thing? And I don't know, it's a bit weird to me.
It really is a head scratcher, other than his ego. Because even if you, like, I could appreciate, even if I didn't like the final outcome, I could appreciate if you were going for more, okay, 50-year anniversary, half a century, putting out a redux version that is appealing to this current generation. But it doesn't even sound contemporary. That's the thing.
No.
I mean, even just basing it off what I heard with Money. You know, again, he's doing like this, like, bar jazz Tom Waits thing. Only it's horrible. Like, it just, if anything, it sounds more dated than the original. I mean, the original, again, it's a timeless record. It transcends time.
Yeah.
So it really is. It comes down to that man's ego. I cannot logically think of any other reason why you would put that pile of garbage out. I didn't even listen to the whole thing.
Yeah. I wanted to give it a fair shake, but, well, anyway, we can move on.
Anyways, went record shopping yesterday, and some really cool finds that have, of course, since been on heavy rotation. I'll show off a few. I don't know if you've ever listened to this record, Hot Buttered Soul.
Oh my God, that's a masterpiece right there.
Hot Buttered Chef.
Oh my God, yeah.
Chef from South Park, great record. Probably be spinning that later tonight.
My brother-in-law and mutual friend Dan introduced me to that, and probably you as well. I assume, yeah. He got me into a lot of that soul stuff.
I don't think Dan and I've ever talked about this record, but it's a Dan record for sure.
Yeah.
This kind of goes with the theme that we'll get into a little bit, but at least for me. But The Blue Mask by Lou Reed.
Mm-hmm.
Got that. I'm refusing to him out of the sleeves this time.
Good.
Another one on theme I'll talk about later, but Townes Van Zandt's self-titled album's third album. This is a masterpiece right here. You want to talk about a masterclass in songwriting. Speaking of a masterclass in songwriting, also heavy rotation, John Prine's first record.
Nice. Love that album cover. I'm just sitting on a bale of hay.
Uh-huh. Wilco might be just my band of the past year. If there's one artist I've listened to more above all else, it's been Wilco. And this record specifically, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. It's my favorite by
That's a band I've been meaning to check out, is Wilco.
You would love this record. You would love this record. Also a fall record. I'll talk about that a little more too. We've got some Keith Jarrett, purchased this recently. Some really great jazz piano improv that's relatively easy to listen to.
I love that.
Doom over here.
MF
I got
Doom.
this pretty recently too. And it's funny because this is as far as my heavy rotations. This one's a little out of place because it's been predominantly country, Americana, modal jazz, hard bop, and then feeling funky with this MF Doom record.
He going back, I think it might even be on that record. Or is it, no, is it Mad Villainy? One of those records, he samples Gentle Giant, actually.
It's Mad Villainy.
Is it Mad Villainy? Okay.
It's on Mad Villainy, yeah. I think this one, I'm blanking out on the track, but he does sample the Mothers, I believe.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, I've heard that record. It's just been a while. So I got to go down a rabbit hole again.
So good. Another one I just purchased yesterday. Sweethearts of the Rodeo for the Birds.
Nice. The Birds, again, another band that I've heard some of, but should dive a little deeper into, because
one of the greatest bands of all time. And then just to cap it off with some new releases, I just wanted to briefly give a shout out to Animal Collective, one of my favorite indie psych bands from the 2000s. They've kind of had a little bit of a career renaissance, starting with last year's record, Time Skips. And back about a month ago, they put out another new record called Isn't It Now? Animal Collective is really out there, and in many ways, they're a product of their time, like that neo-psychedelia from the 2000s. But this is the most mature-sounding Animal Collective record, and they even recorded an analog. It's a contender for Album of the Year, so I've had that one on heavy rotation. This female Japanese artist named Mitsuki that one of my clients actually got me into a while back. Her new record is so good. This land is in hospital, and so are we. It's a little bit of a mouthful there. Sufjan Stevens' new record, he's been going at it for 20 years. So good. And then a guy named Lonnie Holly, who's in his 70s, but didn't really have a music career up until 10 years ago. He's been putting out a couple records in the vein of like jazz, experimental, music concrete, and he has this record called Oh Me, Oh My that I've been really into lately as well, too. And a lot of Can as well, but...
Oh, Can?
That should be it.
No, that'll be a whole discussion.
What about you, man?
I should mention, because you were saying that I kind of got you to listen to Dark Side, and you picked that up. I listened to In a Silent Way the other day, which I really enjoyed. Yeah, I mentioned it when we did our top 5 in the last episode, because it was in your top 5 records, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot.
I'm so glad to hear that.
It was good. I only listened to it once, but and this was just a couple days ago, but I really enjoyed it. I've been, it's while you're pulling, he's got to pull it out. Nice.
Of course.
It's cool. It was really good. I especially like the second side a lot. And that intro is wonderful. But I've been I recently have started a fairly new job. I've been at it for about a month. And one thing that's kind of cool about my job is I'm in the car a lot more, and when I'm in the car I listen to music. And what's kind of cool is that I have an old iPod that I've had forever, and our car doesn't have a Bluetooth setup or anything. So I plug my iPod directly into the car, and that's really the only time I listen to my iPod these days. And so what's nice about it, and one thing I really missed about having an iPod, is that you're scrolling through your artists, and you're like, oh yeah, this artist. Oh yeah, this artist. Oh yeah, this album, right? Like when I go through Spotify or whatever, or it's usually like, oh, I think of an album or an artist, and I'll plug it in, and maybe I'll get recommended something or whatever. But having the I suppose it's similar to like having a bunch of CDs or records on the shelf. It's like scrolling through, you can go, oh my god, I haven't heard this in a while, right? So I've just been doing like sort of scrolling through my art, like all the artists on there, and I'll see a bunch of stuff. So I've been going through this like weird renaissance of just rediscovering music that I hadn't listened to in years, listening to stuff that I have been meaning to listen to for a long time, but just kind of keep forgetting about it. But it's there, so I'm like, oh, because like that happened with Miles Davis. I was going through, I was like, oh yeah, I said I was going to listen to In a Silent Way, so I threw it on one day going to work, and I really enjoyed it. I've been listening to some krautrock too, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Same.
It's off and on a few albums. I was listening to Noi today, the first album, which I really enjoyed. I listened to the first Ashra Temple album, which I can only listen to really on my iPod because it's not on Spotify, which is a crime because it's one of my favorites. Please tell me you're digging that out. Ooh, beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful record right there.
Yeah, it's not on streaming, so I had to invest getting a CD copy a while ago.
Yeah. What else have I been listening to? A lot of instrumental music. A lot of electronic, actually. I was listening to... You know, big. I'm very guilty. Big crime here. I never really listened to a ton of Aphex Twin, so I'm starting to get into them a bit. That what is it? The ambient recordings or whatever. That is
So
like
ambient worked 1987 to 1993, I believe.
Andrew. I listened to that for the first time a few weeks ago, and I've listened to it a couple times since. On the first listen, I said this is one of the greatest electronic albums I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so good, and it's a lot of tracks, but I really like. It didn't get boring. It was like because I'm one of these people who I don't like double records for the most part. I like a 45 minute record.
Sure.
Usually like 5 or 50 minutes is like the you know the max that I can really handle. But that record just kept me interested the whole time. You got it right there. Yeah, beautiful. I didn't need to bring any props today. You're just pulling them all up.
Nice, got us covered.
Yeah. What else? These guys, Osric Tentacles. I have them out. Their new record came out Friday. Was Friday the 20th? Yeah. I've been listening to that. Really like that. It's classic Osrics. What else have I been listening to? Oh, and then whenever I when I start listening to a bunch of krautrock or prog and all this, and I'm listening to this really like all this complex music and this like dare I say like getting towards pretentious stuff, I throw on some ZZ Top to even myself out a little bit. And so
to bring down the pretentiousness a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah, it's like all right. There's enough of this bullshit. Throw some ZZ Top on, So I'll listen to a little of them and some other hard rock and some classic rock. But yeah, I've been going through a really cool renaissance right now, just trying to listen to a bunch of. You ever just get in that mode where you want to hear a bunch of new stuff and you get really excited about it? That's where I've sort of been. And like I think I told you, I listened to that other Kate Bush album. I listened to Peter Gabriel the other day. He's coming out with a new record soon as well, which I'm kind of intrigued by. Yeah. Although I don't understand why we need 3 different mixes of the record, but
the promotion for that album has been weird because he's been putting out a song a month since January. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't kept up with it. I'm kind of just waiting for the whole thing to be released. But yeah, weird promotion there. But anyways,
he's a weird guy, but I love him. And there's tons more. I should have made a list, I guess, but I've been just sort of all over the map, and it's been nice. Like I like when I get in those moods where I can go and I can just put on. I'm in like discovery mode and I just want to hear all kinds of different things, I've been really over the last couple years really getting into electronic music, and I think that's why especially in the last few years stuff like MF Doom and a lot of other rappers, and particularly like a lot of that instrumental DJ music I really, really enjoy, just because there's something about electronic music when it's done really well. It's like the ultimate escapism. I don't know. So, love it.
I agree. I mean, this record specifically, and really his albums, good reading music. Like I can listen to this and read.
Yeah. Same. I think that's you make a good point. That's another thing that I often do with music, especially instrumental music. Is I like. Depending on the book, but like it's a good complement to reading sometimes, especially if you're reading something a little bit more mundane, Yeah,
absolutely. I love that you really dug in a silent way, and I love that you're into Aphex Twin as well.
Yeah, it's really enjoyed Aphex Twin. So if you have any other albums by them or similar artists, I'm all ears. I've also been really into this genre called Dungeon Synth. I don't know how much you've heard of that.
Dungeon Synth.
It's the perfect Rob genre. It's basically all electronic synthesizer music, but it's meant to sound like old school like video game music, and it's excellent.
Interesting.
It's excellent. It's excellent. It's very soundscapey. It kind of reminds me of like some, like Berlin school type stuff, but a bit more like medieval, I guess. I don't know, but it's really, really interesting genre I've been into the last few years. There's some synthwave. I don't know. I kind of getting into some of that. Even some of that lo-fi hip hop stuff's pretty good, actually. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even like with that. I'll even just like random like you can find YouTube clips that are like 24 plus hours long. And
Lo-fi
I'll just
girl,
I'll put
dude.
that on, just like lo-fi hip hop beats in
Yeah.
the background. I
Yeah,
used
it's
to
just
do it when I used to teach all the time with my students. Even like if we were like doing like quiet work, I would just throw lo-fi hip hop beats, and it was just good common ground for them and for me, quite frankly, as well.
I got really into lo-fi hip hop for a little bit there a couple of years ago, and it got me to like it was more. It wasn't really more like diving into specific artists or albums. It was like just
Sure.
throwing it on as background noise. And then I read that McCartney's first album was apparently like super influential on lo-fi hip hop. I was like, really? So I listened to that, and it's that's a really great record, man. The first
He
McCartney
has
album.
he has a electronic side project, and they put out a few records. I've yet to check any of them out. I want to say they're called Firehouse, something along those lines, and
Yeah.
it's McCartney and it's this other dude, and yeah, it's literally like synthy,
Cool.
lo-fi electronic music.
I
but
love that kind of
McCartney.
stuff. It's just great background music. It's great, like it's really just it gets you just to chill. I don't know. It's good chill music. So
I agree. Yeah, I agree, and draws a lot from, of all things, jazz as well.
yeah, I totally see that influence, and I also definitely see the influence of Tangerine Dream,
Totally.
or Kraftwerk or Noi, So it's cool. It's cool to hear stuff like that and kind of be able to spot the influences. I don't know, but to get into
I
the topic, unless you wanted to say something else, but
I was just gonna quickly say
Yeah.
you had mentioned Noi earlier, and they've actually been on pretty heavy rotation for me too. I had Noi 75 displayed on the last episode,
Yeah.
and I've listened to Noi 1, but Noi 2 is an underrated record.
Yeah,
There
I
be
should
more
listen to
love
it
for
more.
Noi 2.
yeah, I
And
mean
I'm gonna end it there.
it's really a great trilogy of albums, to be honest. So I put that
Agreed.
I put that in like a top 10 maybe even of album trilogies. But to get to our
Nice.
topic, our discussion topic, fall albums, like fall music. I guess the question would be, maybe we both could answer this, is like, what is it about the fall that makes you? I could rephrase it, like, what type of music do you listen to the fall? What kind of like emotions does that evoke in you? Like, I guess, how do you connect certain, like, because you and I were talking about this, we're both this way, like, not all music, but there's certain music where it's like, it's almost seasonal for me. It's like, oh, the fall is here. So, for example, this is like one of the most obvious in the world. It's almost Halloween. I'm listening to some Alice Cooper. I mean, like, that's like why would you not listen to Alice Cooper around Halloween?
Yeah.
Like that's the perfect time to listen to him. But why, like, other artists? For example, I have Mr. Neil Young here, Harvest. He is a big time artist that I love listening to in the fall. I don't know if it's the sort of rustic sound and the some of his music has a bit of a twang to it. It's a bit melancholy at times. When I think the fall, I think Neil Young when it comes to music. He's like one of the very first artists that comes to mind. And trying to I guess piece together why that is a little difficult. Like it's possible I got into him around the fall, and maybe I just associate that. But I do think it's a quality to his music. It's the tones. It's the subject matter that he writes about. Again, that sort of like fall to me always, and autumn is always a bittersweet sort of time, because to me it's my favorite season of the whole year. The weather's getting cooler. The leaves. It's beautiful up here in Ontario. Like it's gorgeous right now. With the we're in the heart of fall. The trees have all turned over. The leaves are falling. But it's bittersweet because we know winter's on the horizon, right? So, and I guess that kind of, when I listen to Neil, it's a bit more of an introspective listen. More so than something like, if I listen to Kiss, I'm just jamming out in the car and partying. It's pretty surface level. It's fun, but it's surface level. With Neil, it's more like introspective lyrics, and it's more, reflective. So, I mean, maybe that's why for me, and I sort of associate that with the fall. But how How about you? Like,
Yeah, you know, it was interesting when like really just thinking about, the different seasons because you're right. I too, for every season, associate certain artists, certain records, even songs, and even like with Neil, for instance. Neil is a fall artist for me, but there are select Neil records that are winter records for me.
yeah,
There are select Neil records that are summer albums for me,
true.
And so you get artists like that too. I mentioned this in the last episode. I think I've alluded to it in the past on some of the other videos. Fall for me is a very difficult time of the year. It's a very, although reflective and introspective, time period for me as well. It's also a very melancholy season for me. So with that, I really gravitate towards comfort music. Fall's a time, and I said this before, I really get into country folk Americana mode, but I also really get into more of your modal, more hard bop, post bop, more of like your relaxed jazz as well too, which, coming off the summer and coming off of some of the records we talked last episode, a month ago I was really into like more avant-garde extreme stuff, and like now it's just like it's more just subtle, almost like thinking man's music, as pretentious as that sounds. But another thing is kind of going back to the comfort music. It's a time of the year where I gravitate towards my favorite albums as well too. So, the first episode was very fitting talking about our first five, or our top five rather. Fall is really where I gravitate towards my all-time favorites. Why? Because they are my favorites. That's my comfort food.
Yeah.
It's my comfort music. It's just a time where I'm in here a little more than even sometimes I want to be certain days. But it really is, like you were saying, a time of looking back, a time of introspection. And I think the music that I gravitate towards really reflects that, if you will.
So it's not just me.
No, it's totally not just you. And, I know when we originally had this idea, we were kind of looking at it more Halloween themed. And,
well, that's like a small aspect of autumn, right?
Sure. But it was funny because like Halloween's never been one of my favorite holidays, if you even want to call it that. And there's really no reason as to why that is. I'm not like dimming the lights, locking my door on Halloween. I do welcome trick-or-treaters despite not getting any. It's just, I guess it's just never one that I've just have gravitated towards. So I got kind of thinking about music that reflects that. So of course, it's kind of funny taking the opposite route, I suppose, and going into sad, depressing territory. But for me, especially the last 5 years of my life, that's kind of where I go, music-wise. But with that brings immense and much-needed comfort as well, too. And like I said, the music that I'll talk about momentarily reflects that for sure.
Very nice. Yeah, it's just something about the season, I think. I think it's the onset of winter. Plus, the summer, you always identify summer with fun and, at least I do, like fun and, fun in the sun and activities, and you're busy. And then, the fall comes. Sometimes things slow. Well, they amp up in certain ways, like kids go to school, whatever, for certain people. But in a lot of other ways, life slows down a little bit. And, and we're slowly approaching those winter months. So, yeah, it's definitely more of a time for reflection, I think. It seems to be almost in the nature of the season for a lot of people.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So my question to you is, do you have, starting with bands or artists, do you have specific artists that are just like your go-to
It's hard to say. Like I said, I think of Neil. I think of a lot of folk. Folk is folk for sure. I mean, it hasn't quite happened yet. Like folk would probably be though on a normal basis. like my number one sort of genre, I guess I would go towards. Especially guys like Neil Young, or I might listen to somebody like Nick Drake, or I mean, really insert folk artist here. you know, I like a lot of just for the sounds, like a lot of sort of rustic English sort of sounding things. So like I think again of Tull's folk trilogy, for example, or something like Fairport Convention. There's even instrumental music where I'm more prone to say something like I guess I'll think again in the prog world, something like Griffin, which is a lot of like acoustic guitars, sort of medievally instrumentation. I'm trying to think what else. I kind of start getting into experimental music mode because usually when winter comes and it's the heart of winter, that's when I get weird. And so I get into the really weird stuff. So like the sort of beginning of that kind of starts in the fall. I'll start listening to a little Zappa, or I'll start listening to like a little Beefheart, or some kind of weird avant-garde type of stuff. I get into krautrock a little more. I get into I don't know, other instrumental music that I'm blanking on, but I suppose it depends. It kind of depends on the year. It also depends. You're very right on the album. There are some albums by certain artists that I can think of, let me think. I guess something like Bob Dylan's, for whatever reason, like maybe his early 70s albums, like Blood on the Tracks, I'd probably be listening to a bit more in the fall. Why, I don't know. It's just got that vibe to me, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's one I've been trying to think about, like kind of why I associate certain albums with. It's like, I'm sure there's some of it where maybe I might have, like, I've kind of forgotten now, but like I'm sure there's some albums that I just happen to discover in the fall, so I therefore always associate it with the fall. But I think there are just certain tones and certain sounds that just sound fall, I guess. Rustic, that rustic sound.
And you just said, this was going to be something I was going to ask you too. Do release dates, or even when you first discovered a record, have an impact? So, for instance, for me, going back to Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, fall seems to be new release time for Wilco. Wilco just put out a new record. Cousins, about a few weeks ago. The record last year, Cruel Country, came in around the fall. This anniversary edition, 20-year anniversary of this record, came out last September. So in a case like Wilco, even though, again, this has probably been my band of the last year, by now you would think, okay, it's break time, Andrew, put Wilco down. And like a few days later, they're back in rotation again, because this really is about that time of the year where I discovered Wilco however many years ago. Factoring in, it seems to be their time for releases, but also going back to my point of comfort.
Yeah,
fall is a time where I seek, especially my music, comfort. This record, but this band has become comfort food for me, comfort music for me, right? So this sort of almost captures all of those things. But do you have a record or a band where, like you were starting to allude to before, do you associate them with the fall because that's when you initially discovered them? Like, is there any that just comes?
Yeah, I was trying to think of that. It's a little hard to conjure one. I guess Neil Young. I mean, that's why I put Harvest up there. It must have been Neil Young. I always think, like, I'll always around now listen to that. I'll listen to After the Gold Rush. I'll listen to Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. I'll listen to Rust Never Sleeps. He is just, there's something about him that it's just, he just, not every album, I agree, I mean, there's a lot of his stuff I'll even listen to in the spring or the summer, but particularly I'd say particularly his folky stuff is really, and just about any folk now is when I'll really dive into it, you know. But yeah, it's something especially about those records. It's just it sort of embodies everything. It's the sort of bittersweetness. It's the melancholy that he often has in a lot of his songs, and it's just the plain old sounds. You know, I imagine just him plucking his acoustic guitar, you know, around a bonfire in the middle of like a farm on a fall day or something, or on a fall evening. You know, it seems to me it would be like the perfect complement to a day like today was. It was a little chilly, and you know, the leaves are falling and colors everywhere, and I'm in Canada, so if Neil Young was, you know, strumming along to Harvest or something, it would pretty much be the perfect music. I agree, country music, Johnny Cash or something, or somebody like that I'd probably listen to a little bit. Not that I'm super into country, but if I were to listen to any country, it'd probably be around this time of year. So
about a year ago, it would be exactly a year ago, I was in Philly for pretty much the entirety of October, getting my certification in what I do currently. And I'm not going to get into that, but it was just a weird time for me because I was just coming out of transitioning from teaching to this new thing. I wasn't in a good place at the time. Right around my anniversary when I was sick, and there was a lot of free time, and I just remember there were countless days of just, because I'm not really a city person, so walking around Philly got old after a while. And so I would just spend a lot of my time in the motel room listening to music until it was time to go to the classes that I was taking at the time. And a record that was just so what I needed, and I just attached myself to, was this Townes Van Zandt record that I was talking about before too.
Mm-hmm.
This is his third album, I believe. And Townes is someone who I've dabbled in on and off for years. A song like Poncho and Lefty is one of my favorite songs of all time. That's on one of his later records. But I never really did a deep dive until a year ago. This is a perfect record. This is a perfect record from start to finish. This is phenomenal, relatable, and just gut-wrenching songwriting. I'm a huge Dylan fan. Dylan wishes he wrote this record.
I'll have to listen to it sometime. I've never heard it.
This is another one I showed too. Dylan wishes.
Oh, yeah, I love that album cover. Yeah.
You know, but this Townes Van Zandt record, it's been added to the fall canon for me. And so when I found a copy of this, which I've been looking for a while, yesterday, at one of my local record stores, it was non-negotiable. I was coming home with it. And I'll probably be spinning this tonight, actually, after we're done recording. But, you know, just, again, there's just songs like For the Sake of the Song and I'll Be Here in the Morning, just green fall aesthetically.
Nice.
Sound-wise, like Neil, like that rusty acoustic playing.
Yep.
That voice, man, that voice is just so good. So this has been a go-to fall record for me. And one that, it's funny because it was on such heavy rotation last year, and I don't think I've listened to this album once this year. So it's just like, it's one of those records, like there's just a time in the year, that's when I pull it out.
That'll be the one.
So
I'm endeavoring to, I think I'm starting a precedent with this. That'll be the record I go and listen to after this, and I'll talk about next episode. Much as
Yeah,
I did.
man, I mean, I think you would totally love it. And the Prime record too, which was he was another guy too I've been meaning to check out for years. He was a little more recent, and it's funny because this was a heavy summer record for me. This is a case right here where this is a double dipper. This has now become a summer and a fall album. Summer because it's when I discovered it. There's a balance of fun songs, but really sad, gut-wrenching songs. And when I was spinning this a lot over the summer, it was the fun songs, like the opening track, Illegal Smile, that was making my playlists. Just got this on vinyl recently, but spinning it again, and it's been more of the melancholy songs that have been making appearances in my playlist.
Yeah.
So this is a case of a comfort record for me, hence fall, but a fun record to blast in the car as well during the summer.
It's interesting how they even going down to specific songs, right? In some cases, that So I imagine, like, because you were talking about comfort food, I imagine, you might be into an album like Pet Sounds, but when you think the Beach Boys, you think the summer, right?
Right.
But I'm sure something like I imagine something like God Only Knows, for example, would be a good one to listen to now.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it sounds a bit. It's got a bit of a, like, it's a happy-ish song, but it's also quite melancholy, or quite bittersweet, I guess, is the word.
Yes, which they were masters of, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
And I would also say for me also now, and to contrast where you're saying I'm a big, it's spooky season. I love spooky season. We're in the middle of watching horror movies, so I listen to darker music at this time of the year too. So something like Animals, even Pink Floyd. That would, if I haven't listened to Pink Floyd much aside from that horrible re-recording of Dark Side. But if I were to listen to an album now, it would be Animals, probably, because Animals has that darker edge to it.
Yes.
And it again just screams fall. Like, for me, it's, and this goes back to what you and I, not that lyrics aren't important to me, and not that the musical side of it isn't important to you, but for me, I go back to the tones and the sounds and everything, and there's just certain instruments, certain ways that certain songs are recorded, sound, that just scream fall to me, So I always go back to that too, like darker sounds or more acoustic sounds or more, a rustic, especially like that rustic sound, or like the gritty sort of country-ish sound. I'd go for the fall. It makes me think of like a harvest type sound, or like I said, I was talking about like English folk type of stuff. It's like it's like being in an English wood or medieval wood or something. I don't know. It just conjures all these images to me of what the fall is, and it gives you that sort of like, it's got that sort of like atmosphere to it. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's almost indescribable, really, sometimes, the way music makes you feel.
Yeah, and it's, and it's just one of those things. It comes down to feeling.
Yeah.
It really does, and it doesn't require an explanation. You know it or you don't.
Yeah. But certainly lyrically, I mean, like you said, with some of those more gut-wrenching songs, it's like definitely more of a mellow sort of melancholy vibe is what I'm looking for around this time of the year.
Absolutely. So I guess my final question that I have for you, just with keeping in this topic.
Yeah.
Do you and your significant other have that one fall record that both of you have bonded over, can go to? Because I can tell you, for my wife and I, it's this record right here that I was talking about that I'm also wearing on the shirt. Big Thief's Dragon, New Warm Mountain, I Believe in You. This came out spring of last year, and I heard it in the spring. We saw them this past winter, but this is a fall record. Mm-hmm. This is I don't know how well you can see that.
I love that artwork.
It's these little creatures sitting around a campfire.
I love
this
it.
Screams fire vibes. We were listening to it on my way to my parents earlier today, and Cass had this really neat idea of, I want you to pick an album that screams fall.
Yeah.
Rating it out of 10, but not the music overall out of 10. Out of 10, fall vibes. And I'm like, okay,
fall.
I like this idea. She's like, you can introduce me to new music. I was like, all right, well, let's start with one we both know, and we put this record on. And fun fact, although it's a 10 out of 10 for her, she gave it an 8 out of 10 for her fall scale, which I do disagree with her on, but that's okay.
I love that you have your wife rating albums out of 10, by the way.
Oh, of course.
Amazing.
Comes with the territory, right?
The reason I'm digging around is I did think of one. This band you're gonna obviously tease me for, but I don't care. Songs from the Wood. Jethro Tull.
That's a very fall album cover.
Look at this! Look at this! Look at this cover. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it embodies
than that.
So there are a few sort of more love type songs in this.
Sure.
Tull is one of those bands that I can't really get anybody into aside from her. She was already a fan, and our mutual friend Matt, really. But these songs all have a rustic quality. They have a very, very acoustic, folk-driven type thing. A lot of really cool kind of bit of classical in there, like just a bit, but it's just the sounds of the album. I don't know how to describe it. And this was an album that we were getting together when we originally started dating. It was like late fallish. It was actually a little closer to winter, but we were both listening to this record and the record after it, Heavy Horses, which is sort of in the same vein. And she always identifies this with me, and I do with her for some reason. So this is definitely one of those. These are two big ones for me when it comes to the fall. I don't know what it is. This has the rustic sort of like weird kind of folky quality, and this just has the melancholy kind of folky quality to it. So
nice.
But both great records. Great songwriting.
I don't know why I didn't think to pull Neil for myself.
What?
Joni Mitchell's another one for me. I didn't think to pull anything by her.
Blue? Something like Blue? Oh yeah, that'd be a
totally.
That's something Rachel's a huge fan of that album. I've heard that one a lot. And or even something like like Joan Baez. I'd listen.
Yeah.
What's that one live record of hers that's really, really good? I think it's just called In Concert or something. Really good.
Okay.
That would be a fall one for me. So
I wrote down a few just before we move on, just a few others that I don't own on vinyl, but a band such as the Silver Jews are a very full band for me. They're a 90s Americana indie rock band. Another band, Songs Ohio, if you want some that rustic electric
cool
Neil Young thumping guitar mixed with Americana, then Songs Ohio is a band to check out. And speaking of band, the band.
Yeah, the band. I totally agree.
Especially the first two records.
I totally agree. Or a band like America. Some of their stuff, like that 60s folk thing, singer-songwriter thing. Big time.
Yeah. Totally, man.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, we've gone on and on about this, and I think our episode's running long. So, do we want to get into our top fives, or?
Yes. So, do you want to introduce the top five this time?
So, the top five is going to be a bit unrelated to what we're talking about. We originally tried to do this as its own video, which will be eventually our lost episode because I still have the footage. But the idea is top 5 debut albums. So I basically stuck with the list that I had made since it was never published. I'm not going to do it in any order, personally. And I don't know if did you create a whole new list of top 5s, or how did you approach the list?
I approached it because I could not remember what my list was.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the footage, and my notes for that I must have
I had
deleted
notes.
or something.
Yeah.
So I just picked 5 records that I've given 5 stars on Rate Your Music. A couple of which go with today's theme. That was unintentional. But yeah, that was my approach. And there's no order for mine either. Just
and debut albums are interesting, aren't they? Because they can be very hit or miss. You sometimes get a debut album where it's like, holy crap, this is an album that just, like, the band was never able to, like, in some ways it almost ruined the band's career because they were not able to top it, you know?
Yep.
And then you have other debut records where it's one of the weakest records. David Bowie. No, yeah, his debut album's awful, but yeah, and then you have some in-betweeners where it's like, okay, they had a lot to say, especially in rap. Debut albums are good, I think, because with rap, you know, they have a lot to say in the beginning, and then it's like, well, you're already rich and famous now, so you know, how much more are you gonna what else do you have to say, I guess. So so it's interesting. It seems like debut albums could go either way.
Yeah, for sure, and everything in between, for that matter.
Yeah,
it is a bizarre thing, for sure. How do we do this? Do we want to do the usual format? You list one, I list one.
Sure.
Or do you just want to do all of your 5?
Go ahead. We'll go 5. We'll count down to 5 and whatever. Let's try to be kind of concise because I know we're probably way over time already. So.
Okay. Okay. You go first.
Okay. So I don't have props for mine, unfortunately. Because, but that's okay, because I'm the editor, so I can just put a shiny graphic of the record here, or whatever. So I'm not going to do mine, I guess, in order, so I'll go with, for my number 5, the first Black Sabbath record, which I did also listen to recently, actually, for the first time in a while. And is it a perfect record? No, but that's only because basically every other Ozzy Sabbath record after it is also great. So it's like it's in good company. But the first record, you know, that was kind of my first. That was the first record by Black Sabbath that I think hooked me on the band. I had heard other songs by them, and you know, obviously some songs got a little overplayed on the radio. But the first record I mean, that first song alone, Black Sabbath, with the devil's note, the down now, like, I mean, come on, it's brilliant. I mean, heavy metal was basically born with that riff. But you know, then you also have like the Wizard, NIB, Behind the Wall of Sleep. Gets a bit jammy at the end, but in a good way, I think. I don't think it meanders a little bit, which is why I would say it's not a perfect record. But for a debut album, I have to say it's really, really great. And it was the album that essentially, I mean, you can argue there were some things beforehand and later that were more metal, but it essentially invented the heavy metal genre. So, you know, I got to give it props for that. But just personally, it's an album that I really enjoy, and I think it's a great first record by a band, really. And it was also great because it set a precedent, but they got better, you know. So it wasn't like it was the be all end all for them.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect way to describe that first Sabbath record, indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number 5, I want to say in the last episode I had it at number 2, and that would probably be accurate if we were ranking this. Marquee Moon, Television. Yeah, it's kind of a Halloween-ish cover right there.
Yeah, they kind of look a little like zombies.
Yeah, totally. Marquee Moon, you know, I do think this is a perfect record, another instance where this is just perfect from start to finish. I don't even know how to describe it. So Television came up during the CBGB scene in the late 70s, along with Talking Heads, Blondie, Patti Smith Group, Modern Lovers, you name it. I struggle to call these guys a post-punk band, though. But with that being said, this is just unclassifiable. I mean, you listen to this record, and, you know, I think of the title track, which is just this 10-minute dual guitar interplay between Richard Lloyd and Tom Verlaine, rest in peace. And And you listen to that song, and you're like, okay, this band had Dead records in their collection. But they also had Coltrane records in their collection as well, too. So this is punk in the sense that it wasn't what their contemporaries were doing. But like I said, I have a really hard time classifying this as a punk record or even a post-punk record. I'm sorry, it's getting late. But it's a masterpiece from start to finish, and some of the coolest, gnarliest guitar playing you will ever hear. Martine Moon, Television.
Nice. An album I need to hear, like,
yes,
really listen
and one
to.
you would.
So maybe I'll have to add that as well at some point, because like I said, I am in a discovery mode, so that's one. That's one that's been on the list forever. I always forget about it. I don't know why. Do you ever have those records? Real quick, like very very quick tangent. Do you ever have those records where it's like there's no bias, there's nothing against the record, or band or whatever, but it's just like I've been meaning to get to them, but I just haven't, and I keep forgetting. That is like probably that is probably like the number one album where it's like I just like I've been meaning to listen to that for ages, and I just have yet to get to it because I always hear about it.
That could be an episode of itself, honestly.
Yeah, it really could. I'm going to change mine up a little bit because I saw another record here, and I think it also goes with the theme with what we're talking about, and I think it's good enough. I have it as number 6 on my list, but I think it rightfully deserves to go into top 5, so I'm going to bump another one out. 5 Leaves Left by Nick Drake. I think it's his best album. I do like Brighter Lighter. Pink Moon is really good. Pink Moon, I think, slightly overrated, and I think the problem with Pink Moon is I feel like Nick Drake was such in a fragile state when that record was recorded, and it feels very bare bones. Now that's fine to a certain extent. I think it's a little too bare bones, but the songwriting in that record's still great, and I still really like it. But he was basically like very very fragile in terms of his mental health at that point. What I like about 5 Leaves Left, number one, I love the strings. In a lot of the songs. Really, really love that. I think the songwriting is top-notch. I think his guitar playing is top-notch. I love his vocals. I love the whole vibe of the record. I should have even thought about it. Honestly, that might be the quintessential fall record, now that I'm thinking about it, is 5 Leaves Left. I mean, even the title, 5 Leaves Left, indicating that the leaves are falling. But yeah, no, 5 Leaves Left. What a wonderful record. Again, some of the greatest songwriting I think on any record, and I just love the whole vibe of the record. And it's another one of those ones where just track by track every song is great. There isn't a turd on the whole thing, so I don't know. Probably at least I would say in my top 5 favorite folk albums of all time.
Well, the reason why I have, up until this point, mentioned Nick Drake, especially the theme of the episode, because...
Beautiful. Okay, and you've got the props. See, this is the man with the props. I don't have to... You're making my job easy. I don't have to add any graphics.
5 Leaves Left. I mean, and this was on the original
wonderful
episode list too for me. This record, I mean, everything you said, ditto. This is certainly my favorite Nick Drake record as well.
Yeah.
I think, yes, we can make an argument for it being his best. This record specifically, interesting enough, is a spring and fall record.
I can see that.
I think lyrically, for me at least, falls under fall, right? With that, again, just the theme of introspection specifically on this one. But stylistically, this sounds like a spring record for me, and it conjures different feelings as a result. Like, when I'm listening to this album during the spring, it comes with feelings of joy, and I don't know if that's because Brighter Later and Pink Moon are winter records, and those are just both fucking depressing records.
Yeah.
But when I listen to this record during this time of the year, it is the lyrics that I hone in on. So it's one of those things where I'm honing on different elements of the record depending on the season. And that's kind of an epiphany I had earlier today when I was putting this together. But I'm with you. The
Beautiful.
arrangements on here. This record is just so good, and it's a headphones record. I
Oh
can't
no, yeah,
emphasize
you
that.
can't. No,
It
you
is
can't.
a
You can't
headphones
listen.
record.
Yeah, you cannot listen to that album any other way. It is also a great like going. I agree with you with the spring, but it's rainy day. Rainy day.
Yes.
You put that on in the spring, just as good as
Yeah.
in the fall. Beautiful. Cool to see we got a duplicate one on here.
That doesn't happen very often.
No, it doesn't. My number 3 is going to be it's my favorite album by this band, which is I know is really weird, gonna sound really weird to a lot of people, but it's the first Led Zeppelin album, which I know all the criticism of it because of the plagiarism and what have you. I will say that yes, it sucks that they didn't credit the artists who wrote the songs. I will say in terms of the songs themselves, they make them their own. They really do. Like they are vastly different from the original tunes, from what I've heard at least. But yeah, they should have obviously credited the original artist. But that being said, I mean, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, one of my favorite Zeppelin tracks. The opener, Good Times, Bad Times, Dazed and Confused. Even stuff like Your Time's Gonna Come, Black Mountain Side. I mean, I love the whole record. I don't know why it's my favorite Led Zeppelin record. I was always, when I was first getting into Led Zeppelin, it was like 2, it was 4, and then it was like Houses after that, and Physical and stuff like that. Houses is it's probably my second favorite record. But as the years go on, there's just something about the first record that resonates with me. I don't know if it's because it really does sort of capture the energy of what they were doing at the time. And when Zeppelin came out, I mean, they just shattered the world, I mean, nobody had heard a band like them before. And, I think it does come through in the record, despite the, issues with credit, writing credits and what have you to whoever. I think the music is still really good. And, yeah, I don't know, just some of my favorite Zeppelin tracks on there. So, yeah, nice. Zeppelin 1.
Cool pick. Yeah, we are different when it comes to Zeppelin, because for me it is more that middle period that I'm such a big fan of. Houses and Physical Graffiti, and even
funny enough
for that Presence as well.
Funny enough, those albums I agree, but Zeppelin 1, like I'd put those all, like I'd probably put like Houses and like maybe like Houses, Physical, and Zepp 3. But for some reason, there's just something about Zeppelin 1 I can't.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Interesting. So, speaking of records that I've been nagging Rob to get into, and this was a contender for the album swap, 2 or 3, I think, as a backup.
Major list there.
Here come the Warm Jets. Brian Eno.
So,
just off.
Go ahead. No, go ahead with what you're saying.
Just off the cusp of leaving Roxy Music. As a matter of fact, I think everyone in Roxy is on this record but Brian Ferry. This is weirdo glam rock. This is taking what Bowie and Roxy Music, for that matter, what they were doing it, but just pushing the artier side of glam as far as it could go. Our good friend Frippo Pants is on this record.
Yeah.
And there is a song on here
Robert Fripp,
Babies on Fire that is probably not only my favorite Robert Fripp guitar solo besides Starless, it might be his best guitar solo on any recording, Crimson included. It is so freaking awesome. And this is just a fun record. It really is. It's, even though it's weird and out there, it's very easy to listen to. Especially if you're a fan of Roxy Music as well, too. Eno would go on to hone in more on the ambient side of things on subsequent records.
Yeah.
This is a great balance of what Eno was doing later in the 70s with Bowie and solo as well, and bands like Cluster he would work with later. But this is still very reminiscent of what he was doing before via Roxy Music. Killer record. Here Comes the Warp Jets.
I was wondering what that record was fairly recently because I was going to actually finally listen to it, but I couldn't for the life of me remember. I was like, I'll look at the titles. I'll be able to remember. I should have just texted you. But now I have a reference, so I'll listen to that at some point too. I have listened to Eno's more ambient stuff, which I like. But I specifically that record and Fripp and Eno, I want to give a fair shake because I love Robert Fripp as well. So
the first, which came out right around the same time period, I could have added that to the debut list. It's here somewhere. The first actual Fripp Eno record is very good as well too.
Okay, since this is in no particular order, and just to transition very smoothly here, speaking of Fripp, I will make my number 2 In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. I don't really feel like I need to say much here because we did an entire King Crimson discography series. Shameless plug again, as I always do whenever King Crimson comes up. I listened to them recently too, by the way, Islands, and then Rachel actually put on Discipline. I think it was yesterday, which was nice to hear. It's been a while, but yeah, I mean, In the Court of the Crimson King echo what I said about heavy metal and Black Sabbath. That's basically this record with progressive rock. I mean, really, what we know of as progressive rock was born with In the Court of the Crimson King. So, and again, to me, it's not 100% perfect record. It's pretty close. But, you know, I mean, Epitaph, Schizoid Man, I mean, what do you have? The title track in The Court of the Crimson King. I mean, it's all fantastic stuff. Amazing musicianship. Some good songwriting there. I love the lyrics to Epitaph. Very creepy, dark kind of stuff. And
It's also a masterpiece.
yeah, it really is. And yeah, just it's in the Court of the Crimson. It's in the Court of the Crimson King. I don't have anything else to say about it. We've covered it a million times.
Awesome. I knew that was going to be on your list.
Yeah.
So I chose to not include it for mine. But it's a classic, of course. And yes, we have talked about it in depth for sure.
Yeah.
My number 2, the other record band I was not talking about during the main discussion, because they're on this list, but very much this time of the year specifically, they're in heavy rotation. Murmur by REM.
Oh, the first REM, yeah.
This album, I have a really interesting relationship with. So I said in the last episode that they were my go-to band when I was sick. And so they just, by a result of that, have become a fall band for me. This was not the first REM record I heard, but it was the one that got me into REM. As a matter of fact, it falls under that camp, that kind of like that in the middle. So there are a lot of hardcore fans that will say this was the greatest thing they ever did and everything else is whatever, which is a load of crap. But for me, it falls somewhere along that camp of, no, they went on to make better records. I would also probably no longer consider it my favorite REM album. That would be their 4th record. But this I have the most personal attachment to. This is just... I can't even get into it because it'll be a 6-hour podcast, but this is a record where I could just do a recording on its own and just discussing what it means to me.
It might be a good idea for a video sometime.
There you go. Sometimes to the point where I really get emotional talking about it. So having said all of that, it's one that I can really only listen to during the fall when I'm kind of in that melancholic state. Mm-hmm. And that could be part of the reason why it's probably no longer my favorite. But I think of a record like Life's Rich Passion, their 4th album, that's just a fun record you can listen to any time of the year. But this is one where it really does conjure up a lot of feelings, positive and negative, that I listen to it when I know I need to, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Hands down, have the deepest connection with this album without a doubt. And I think it's just one of the greatest debut albums of all time.
Nice.
Murmur by R.E.M.
I was expecting that one. So I guess the last one I'll mention, I don't know if it's my number one, but this is another. I mean, you obviously notice with me, it's a lot of stuff for me when it comes to like, my very favorites. It's usually stuff that I discovered early on, but I guess it makes sense because it's shaped the rest of my musical, tastes, I suppose. But yeah, I'll go with Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow for mine. I don't know if it's my number one debut, but it's in the top 5. Yeah, I mean, you remember that time when we talked about a little bit the last episode when we were all discovering music together, and Rainbow was a big one for a while. I think it's because for me at least, it felt like it was a band that we had discovered that nobody was really talking about for some reason, and now it seems like a lot of people know who the band is, especially metal fans and stuff. But I mean, there's a charm to the first record. I think Rising's still better in terms of the Ronnie James Dio stuff, but there is a charm to that first record, which is effectively the band Elf, which is the band that Dio was part of before he joined Rainbow. It was effectively them plus Ritchie Blackmore, and so there isn't the musicianship necessarily of later on like Cozy Powell, like the powerhouse that was Cozy Powell on drums, or any of those guys. But I think Roger Glover joined them and stuff later too. So they weren't like, Deep Purple, level musicians, but it kind of works for the record. It's a bit more intimate. It's a bit more, the songs are a little bit more humble, but charming. Stuff like Catch the Rainbow, for example. I sing that to my daughter every night. It's kind of got that lullaby quality to it. And since she was a baby, I, rock her to it and sing her the song. It's a great little ballad, kind of whimsical sort of ballad that showcases his vocals really well. And just like the riff of Man on the Silver Mountain is just up there with some of the best riffs in rock, something that I think Blackmore is just a master at. And even something like 16th Century Greensleeves, or what's the other one, Temple of the King. They kind of have this, they all kind of have this like sort of whimsical quality to it that is very charming. It's kind of like it's before, like with Rising, they became a metal, like a big time like heavy metal band. With Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, they were very much like trying to find their footing, and it comes off like quite charming. I think it's a charming little album with some good songwriting, and I don't know, it's fun. It's not something I listen to a ton, but every time I listen to it, I really enjoy it. I think it's a solid album. So there you go, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow.
Nice. My number one was my number one in the last episode. It would probably be my number one overall. One of my favorite bands of all time.
I know where
talk
you're going.
about them a lot. Velvet Underground.
Yep.
Nico. I'm not going to go too crazy here. I've talked about this record. I'll just emphasize, like I said in episode 1, I remember hearing this album the first time, 20 years old, 19 years old, whatever, and this was the record I heard for the first time and went, yeah, there are no rules to rock and roll. Having said that, rock and roll was still in its infancy, and this album came out in 1967, and it deconstructed everything that it was up to that point. Even Summer of Love, Psychedelia. We go, nope, we're not doing that. Although they do tease you with the first track, Sunday Morning. You think, okay, this is very psychedelic, and then it goes right into the chugging, I'm waiting for my man, and just this record is just out there. Is it, instrumentally, is it on like the levels of like King Crimson? No, absolutely not. But again, it doesn't need to be, because that's not the point. That's not what it's trying to do. This record just has influenced my musical taste from when I heard it to present day. It's such an important record in my musical development. there's personal significance along with the record we talked about last week, the self-titled, and it's killer, man, from start to finish. I can listen to it anytime. I pick up something new every time. It's unlike anything else, and the fact that it's almost 60 years old, it's like Dark Side of the Moon. This is a timeless album. Sure, it's a product of its time, but it also transcends time, and that's what I just love about records like this, like Dark Side of the Moon. It's the Banana album, man. What more can you say? Andy Warhol.
I'm not an Andy Warhol fan, to be honest, but that has a little to do with the music,
overrated.
I think. Yeah, but you just gave me a weird thought. Thinking about the anniversary of some of these albums. It's weird to think in our lifetime we may potentially be able to see the 100th year anniversary of some of these albums. It's very feasible. It's very feasible. So that's kind of a weird thing I just thought of.
2067, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, guys, we're going to wrap this episode up. We had another little section planned, but we decided to drop it due to time. So if we get a chance, we'll do that on a future episode. And, we'll talk about that at a later date. But I guess we want to thank everybody for watching and perhaps tease a little bit about what the next episode's to bring. You want to talk about it, Andy? It's going to be our first theme show, so...
Even before we talked about this new podcast format, this is just something you and I have always been like, we gotta do this.
Yep.
We've already alluded to these first two Talkin Muzak episodes that you and I have a mutual love for cosmic music.
Yes.
Muzak, aka krautrock.
Oh, of course.
So we are, for episode 3, it is going to be a krautrock focused episode.
Krautrock November, everybody.
Krautrock November.
So go listen to your Krautrock albums.
There you go. We're gonna give just a little bit of history overview. The top 5 will be our top 5 favorite Krautrock records, and just the discussion. It's just gonna be all things. We'll even talk about, is that term due for a name change? You have to stay tuned and find out for the next episode.
You have to stay tuned.
Regardless,
Nice.
It's going to be entirely themed, all things German experimental music, krautrock. I'm so excited. I know you are too.
I am too.
It's going to be so much fun. So get your like you said, your krautrock records going.
Yeah, start spinning that krautrock.
Going.
And I should stipulate here real quick for that episode. There is this notion that there's like krautrock, and then there's the sort of Berlin school electronic scene. It's all one as far as I'm concerned. Like, the electronic scene was born out of krautrock, so I plan to talk about that whole period personally. That it's gonna span. To me, it's like it spans like the late '60s when Amandul first started, that time, to into the 80s when bands like Kraftwerk and Tangerine Dream and bands like that were putting out some great electronic records. And, I'm sure we'll also touch on influences in the whole bit, but just so everybody is aware of what the episode is going to encompass, we're planning to talk in depth about krautrock, which, as Andy said, I'm tickled pink about.
It's going to be so fun, and I mean, like Rob was alluding to, it really is. It's more of a movement as opposed to, krautrock isn't a genre necessarily, but there are tons of familiar genres that are part of that krautrock umbrella that are all significant, and we're going to talk about them in the next episode.
Very excited. So in the meantime, we thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. This one ran a bit long, but, we had a good time. It was a great discussion. And follow us on social media. We'll have that all posted below in the descriptions. And whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever you listen to us on Spotify, we really appreciate it. Thank you all for the support. You want to take us out, Andy?
Out. Later, guys. Till next time.
All right. Bye, everybody. Peace.
Peace.
Where do the balloons come from?
How is this happening?
They're listening.
Balloon. Rise.
Yeah. It's like Pennywise.
Oh, that was a long one indeed.